You're welcome back. This is Newsfile. It's your most authoritative news analysis platform. And here on Newsfile, as always, we put Ghana first. It's brought to you by Bank of Africa, strongest a group and closest a partner, MTN. Everywhere you go, Star Assurance, your solid partner. Ashesi University, educating ethical and entrepreneur leaders for Africa. Robert & Sons Optical Services, your comprehensive eye care service provider for 31 years. Duroplast, how you get water matters, and remember always, where Duroplast goes, water flows. St. Thomas Eye Hospital, providing excellence in eye care. Haptel, everything you. Miwe Insurance, dial *165# on the MTN to join. Magdan Aviation, your dependable private aviation request solved. Just like that, solved. And some of you have been sharing your views with that. Masaudu says that it's very difficult in this Ghanaian economy, but the very unfortunate thing is that the people in government don't feel the same, so they think all is all right with all Ghanaians, like it is to them. Oh, really? So I've been asking myself, does the president sleep? Is he able to sleep? And sleep well under these circumstances? But somebody, we're having a discussion. He said, well, he jetted off to where? To do something somewhere. In these circumstances, he shouldn't be traveling. What was it that was so important for him to be traveling, to go for environmental whatever? And Manasseh will say, the same people who are depleting the Achiwata forest, among other places, are going to preach on environmental conservation. John says, we don't even understand this question because of the economic crisis. And then Snow, you say, I'm not even coping, but just surviving because there is little I can do about it. Chris says, I am a businessman, but I haven't sold or bought goods for 2 weeks now. The issue is that we don't know the fate of the economy, whether it will change for good tomorrow or it will get worse. In conclusion, my situation is called confusion. Nimanche says, right now, I'm living by the grace of God. Muhammad, your message is really tall. Muhammad Kamie says, it's good to always adjust yourself to emerging situations. I have parked my motorbike since September. People are trying to get motorbike rather. Since September because of the because of the fuel prices. I have stopped taking tea with bread. I have substituted the bread with kuli kuli. I have stopped. Oh, Charlie, kuli kuli. Yeah, I like to have some. I have stopped using my fridge because of the electricity bills. I bath once in a day. Charlie, are you being frank with us? Once in a day, and then you've stopped going to the barber. Your girlfriend too doesn't go as much. So you say you are now using Alata soap and shea butter. In fact, that's what we should be doing. That's what we should be doing. Anyway, thank you very much for your message. Nana Kweku says, gradually running away from my responsibilities so I can survive. Don't. Charlie, men, we are born into this. Don't run away from your responsibilities. Let your partner understand and do the best you can. Yakubu Ibn Chambers says that roadmap to recovery of Ghana's globally orchestrated economic turmoil, views of a street economist in a flag. I'm asking you whether you know what the roadmap is. So he says, just as COVID-19 was tackled head-on with all the arsenals Ghana could gather, let us do same for the economic crisis. Maximize and prioritize developing indigenous alternatives for energy production and local foods. Yakubu, we are asking whether you know what the roadmap is from our leaders so that we can all, as it were, join to assist. Now, let's get to whether or not we are getting an IMF deal soon and whether we'll have the budget read. Once again, I start with you, Dr. Tue Champong, and we say thank you to our guests who have taken leave of us at this point. I'll let you know who they are. Yes.
So thank you. I think we would get an IMF deal.
Before end of year?
Yes. So what that means is that the staff level agreement, there are two forms here. In fact, let me take you a step back. There are 3 stages. The first stage is the IMF concluding its Article 4 assessment, which is more or less the state of the Ghanaian economy. Within that Article 4 assessment, they will do the debt sustainability analysis. And it is that debt sustainability that would tell us whether we have to restructure our debt, whether domestic, external, as a precondition for accessing IMF funding. That's first. Subsequent to that, then you would have to then agree the staff level agreement with the fund. What this basically is that those who work at the IMF, those who came for the country missions, would more or less agree some broad areas of reform with the Ghanaian government, and that they table that to the IMF board. So that's the third step in the process. It is only when the board approves that you have a formal program as such. But the staff level is also quite important, because very rarely do you have the staff level going to the board and then the board sort of saying, we don't agree with that. So I am confident that we might get a staff level agreement by the end of this year. Why am I saying so? I say so because just 2 days ago, Egypt was able to agree a 46-month program with the fund, also 3 billion, under what they call the extended fund facility. Egypt applied in March of this year. In May, their finance minister came to tell the media that the process would take a couple of months. And then just this November, a few days ago, the announcement was made. So from March to November, that's 7 months in the process, from application to all the missions to get in a staff level agreement. Similar thing with Kenya. And yesterday, again, there was something, I think it's Cape Verde also as well. So that gives me some assurance that we can get something. We applied in July. So give or take, if you add plus minus 7 months, that goes into January. So
we heard from people, including Kwame Pening, the economist. We've also heard from the minority leader, as that there have been problems. Kwame Pening was clear. He said that our negotiations with the IMF were not going well.
There might be challenges, and there would always be, because you submit data. They would query it. They will come back to you, ask you, clarify this, do this, all those things, right? That's part and parcel of the process.
I must add, though, that he said what he had to say before the president spoke.
Right.
And was absolutely confident that everything was okay.
At this stage, what would go into the program or the fund program, the core areas, the fund knows, Ministry of Finance knows. And I'm sure that some of it will be reflected in the 2023 budget. So there's something in the fund program they call prior actions, which is more or less a country has to take certain tangible steps to show that you're trying to fix the problem before they approve the financing. That would go. The issue with this government, for me, is really how the communications bit of it has been handled. It's less so of the technical negotiations, actually the PR all around it, where we were here a few weeks ago where one of the MPs sat on this very platform to say, we will have an IMF program by 2 weeks or 3 weeks' time, right? 15th of November. Yeah. And some of us said, no, that's actually not the case. Because even the staff level, by what other countries have done, you're talking 8 months in the process on average in that regard.
When I asked him when he said that, he actually said, look, expect the president to announce that to you when he speaks to you.
The president announced, the president said it's going to be December, which is a much more realistic target. So the problem is the communications has been, around this issue, in my view, has been rather shambolic. And that is also part of what is feeding into a lot of the uncertainty within the market at large. Because we need to be very clear what the government is doing, where they are in the process, and how and when they expect to conclude the deal, but without making emphatic statements that we will get it by so and so date. The second thing also is, even the whole roadmap to the recovery, I'm trying to wrap up here, how many stakeholders have been engaged in that process? What shape or form? A few weeks ago, the president and also the finance minister was talking about enhanced domestic program. What is it? We don't know, right? But the very people or the citizens of this country...
If people like you don't know, then this is serious.
You know bits of it. You know what shape it will take, but the details matter. It's not about headlines. It's really about the substance of it. And that's why some said, let's have a national forum, bring everybody, and let's have this idea of just meeting one stakeholder group and all of that. It just doesn't work, right? So there's a problem with the communications, and there's a problem with also the stakeholder process of engagement. And then all of that feeds into that uncertainty that we're seeing within.
We need to have a deal before we can present the budget.
No, you don't need to have a deal before you can present the budget. The budget by law has to be read by the end of November. That's what the law says.
Right.
What we would have to do in the budget is to reflect some of the prior actions that you have agreed with the fund in. And the budget then becomes really important, because it's most likely that you get the budget before you get the staff level agreement. And the budget must then communicate to the market, to players, that you are doing something substantive about the problem on your expenditure, on cutting down waste, on dealing with the issues at the various state-owned enterprises, but also on growing the revenue base from the 13% tax to GDP to about 17%. Those are the real, detailed, substantive issues that I think a lot of market players are looking out for within the budget, especially given that it is highly likely that the budget might come before the staff level agreement is agreed to. But like I said, the high-level areas of what they have already engaged the fund on would reflect as prior actions within the budget.
Okay. Thank you very much, Dr. Theo Champong. And let me, at this point, quickly also bring in, I'll come to you. And there's a reason sometimes I really want you to sort of have the last, contribution to make. So let's see, Alfred. You have followed what has been going on in Parliament. We are also picking up, as is being reported around, that the finance minister himself may not actually be presenting the budget, even if it's ready, because his own people, the majority caucus, don't want him in there. And then the minority have also tabled a motion of censure against him. How do you see things working?
Well, my information is that the finance minister may not be around. If my information is right, by next week he may not be around. They were looking at November, end of November, but given the stance of his own MPs as well as the minority, it's highly unlikely that he may present the budget. Let me begin this whole thing by analyzing it in a certain way so I don't forget certain facts. In adversity is where you find the human ability to rise. Sometimes challenges create situations where we're able to find solutions. In doing so, it had to take the former President Mahama to work hard to find a way of resolving it by bringing on stream more power. In our current situation, one would expect that the president and his team would take an opportunity to take us above a certain situation. What am I saying here? Yes, we are already in a messed up situation, likely created as a result of decisions by them. I mean, if you choose to spend 25 billion cedis to solve a 9 billion problem, that is your own decision. You can't blame someone else for that. They did that. And indeed, in doing so, they killed domestic businesses, some of which they could save, and some which the courts clearly have proven were problematic. But then we are where we are now. Unfortunately, the government has failed in carrying us all along. In all these negotiations, even those close to them do not know what is being discussed in terms of the content. They've not had buy-ins from others, and even those they've engaged are not sure whether what they sold to them are what are being carried on in the negotiations. One would only hope, for example, that in a crisis like this, there was a proposal for government to take the opportunity from the former president to take the opportunity to renegotiate the securities they mortgaged in order to create room for us to fiscal space for them to spend. I mean, one would hope that is an opportunity that they would take. And, well, we don't know whether they've taken it on board or not, but one would hope is there. I have asked myself, for example, if you take a look at the big ticket items in terms of revenues to this country, or in terms of what contributions to our GDP, it's largely cocoa, gold, and oil. Apart from cocoa, whose resources come to the BOG because it's handled by Cocoa Board, all the others largely stay out of the state. Is it possible at this point in time, for example, to create a situation where we would compel gold resources to be paid into this country before even anything being taken out through a system, a regularized system by the BOG? Can you imagine the kind of stability, even if for a short while, that such resources will bring into the country? That's something that I would hope they would take into, they'll factor into the decisions they are making. Now let me come back to the question you asked earlier. I also believe that a staff agreement may be possible, but that is not the most important thing. Of course, that would lead to some confidence in investors. But then, in as much as you do not get releases or release of funds to help you, which will come with a board approval, you could have the situation persisting. Unfortunately, we've had international experts, local experts, cautioning this administration about the laxity with which it approached this deal. I would hope that it will work harder for us to have a board approval, because really, in as much as a staff approval may be something, it will not be a resolution, a major resolution. Because once you're not going to get releases and you're going to go through this crisis of not having access to the international markets to borrow, not being able to raise enough funds to sort out your problems, you have a challenge with your resources. I mean, depreciation will still occur, and that will still pose much of a problem.
Okay.
In that sense, I do not see any serious resolution by December. Indeed, by next week, the second tranche of the cocoa loan, syndicated loan, will come in. That should sustain us a bit, let's say up to beginning of December. What then happens? Where are we going to get resources to take us through December? Apart from the fact that we expect, as usual, December inflows of forex from Ghanaians and those who come on holidays. But will it be enough to meet the needs of the importers, to meet the needs of the BDCs and all that? And if we've not reached an agreement that would yield certain funds to us, how are we going to go through that?
Do you have a certain idea what the roadmap to recovery is? If you were, anybody met you on the street, or you met any of your friends at the airport or somewhere, and they ask you, so Ghana, what's your roadmap to recovery? What could you tell them in 30 seconds?
Even the experts can't. Even those in government can't. That is a dangerous thing. Even those in government, you speak to MPs, they don't know. And indeed, it was just about 2 weeks ago that we heard that the government had, recruited contracted some experts to be dealing with, with that on his behalf. But how do you sort such a situation without carrying people along? It's a worry. I don't know of anyone as yet who knows of that. I don't.
All right. Let me come to Dr. Mahama here. And you see, I think it was the vice president who said some time ago that things will get worse before they get better, right? And as we understand, we are supposed to prepare for even more difficult times. So the ordinary Ghanaian ought to have an idea what it is that is the roadmap to recovery, so they can buy in and be on board, like they say, all hands on deck, so that we get through this situation. So if it's not on the lips of everybody, then it's bad enough. Before he speaks, I want to share just a few points with you from the author of this book, Good Habits in Bad Economic Times, Richmond Kwame Frimpong. If you know, he's been writing, a lot, particularly in the financial papers. Good Money Habits in Bad Economic Times, Richmond Kwame Frimpong. And he says he wants all of us to keep this in mind, coping mechanisms, how to survive this. 1, it says, analyze your personal financial reality and ensure you are not spending what you do not have. The president said our problem now is that we are spending what we don't have. So Richard Kwame Frimpong says, be sure you are not spending what you do not have. 2, cash is king in these times. Ensure to diversify your cash holdings. Ensure you have enough cedis to cover your basic needs and emergency, instead of rushing for dollars you may not need. Don't go for the dollars you may not need. Remember how rushing for the dollars has also compounded our situation. 3, save minimum 10% of every earnings before you make any expenditure. People have issues with that because their salaries remain what they have been. Meanwhile, the value of their salary that they were taking 3 months ago is not the same. If you have some money in the bank, you can appreciate how it looks like. That you had $1 million in the bank, and today that's 1 million is almost like 500 cedis in your hand. 500,000 in your hand. 4, get a side hustle in addition to your regular job and monetize all your free gigs. 5, don't lend money to family and friends unless you are prepared to write it off in case of default. We want our families to beat us up. Then 6, be frugal. Make budget for every expense and stick to it. Finally, don't just invest. Insure. Our insurance companies are writing to us, asking us to come back and do some things. So this is from his book, Good Money Habits in Bad, Economic Times, by Richmond Kwame Frimpong, my church mate from years ago. Yes.
Yeah, Council, quickly before I go to the roadmap, I just want to quickly discuss and dispose of some bit of propaganda being pushed by my brother about the financial sector cleanup. I think it's been mentioned several times, and I know the burden on the MPP is beyond the ordinary man's standard to prove his word and his competence. But to mention that an amount of 9 billion was supposed to be used in financial sector cleanup and the government ended up spending 25 billion, is just to, again, expose the lack of understanding of the extent of the problem that was created by the same government. Look, the 25 billion spent was not for anything but just payment of deposit. So, if you are just paying deposit, you are not doing any administrative cost. No fee for what you call it, the liquidator, and just official fee, official deposit given to depositor, and you said that it was 9 billion. It means that they never really understood the magnitude of the financial sector crisis. And we just need to put that to the dustbin. Look, it's 25 billion spent, and it is solely for the depositors. And these are data verifiable, and we should always stick to that. He mentioned issue about the energy crisis. I don't want to go into that because of time. But Samson, I just want you to give a minute or two to give us a genesis of how government has come with this IMF program. Because it seems that people don't even know what has transpired so far, what has been the discussion with the government. Look, government announced...
That means you are doing a bad job.
It means that sometimes it's the opportunity of, and I'm going to use this platform as, the first step. Look, there are a lot of questions to ask. There are a lot of people discussing, but the time to afford for such a discussion is usually not there. Maybe we can ask to come and buy time, probably to explain that as part of the government.
So we have invited you.
Yeah,
and you are now going to do this.
To do that.
Why is it that since the president spoke, there is no clear program from Ministry of Information and your communication team to do, as it were, what the president had us to expect, that they were going to be fleshing out of the details of everything, you know?
Yeah, I will handle that. Look, in July, government announced the decision to go to the IMF. On the 26th of September, the IMF mission visited Ghana for a day of about a fortnight. At that particular discussion, they agreed that, look, we need to have a debt sustainability analysis and we need to have a domestic program. These two together was going to form the basis of any negotiation. Governments, after the 14 days of engagement with the mission, came to the conclusion that, one, we need to do something about tariffs, okay, because we need to have some kind of something that reflects automaticity in the tariff regime. Government also, in fact, the IMF also identified the energy sector payment as one of the albatross around the neck of this country, and that the shortfalls, close to 3 billion, is a mess for the country. The fund also realized that, look, we need to raise more revenue. In fact, we need to increase our revenue by 1.3% to GDP. These were the key broad marks that the fund agreed. And the discussion was very positive. The fund was forthcoming, government was forthcoming in giving them the information they needed in order to make a decision. And that dovetailed into the government decision to engage an advisor. The work of the advisor is to help government do the debt sustainability analysis. And also, government had also, through the Minister of Finance, also started preparing what we call the Enhanced Domestic Program, and also now government has approved at the last cabinet retreat, post-COVID economic recovery program. That is the blueprint for the economic recovery, and that is the blueprint for the engagement with the fund. But let me explain a bit why we needed debt service, sustainability analysis, because in order to secure, I've heard Dr. Tio mention it on several times on your platform, like, you cannot have a fund program when your debt are not on sustainable path. You must demonstrate that you have a plan to bring your debt back to a more sustainable path. The trajectory of your debt should move from debt distress to moderate risk of default. So that target was agreed also with the fund, and the fund said that, look, go and look at your numbers, what fiscal measures adjustment you need to do, what fiscal consolidation you need to do, what debt operation you need to do in order to position your country in the path of debt sustainability. And that is what the government was doing. And you remember in October 10th to 16th, the annual meeting of the World Bank and then IMF, the sideline of that meeting again, government was engaging the fund on getting the details of this particular negotiation. Look, the fund program is not a mechanical process, and it's not like asking a friend for a favor, where the person will give you a yes or no answer. It is actually based on data, based on negotiation, based on verification, based on cross-checking, and to show consistency in the data pattern. The fund will always have to be careful because they are committing funds. That's a collective fund because Ghana is a member of the IMF and will contribute to it. And with this particular mechanism, the fund has to be sure that they are approving a program that can bring us out of crisis, and at the same time, they are not funding. In fact, as part of the requirement, we must have a fully funded budget. And I'll come to the 23 budget. But the roadmap, after our engagement, was that what? We need a debt target. We need to have our financing gap. And our financing need and the financing gap. That was the first thing. The second thing was that the fund, when they came, they engaged with social protection agencies. For instance, LEAP, school feeding. And they made it categorically clear that even though we are in difficult time, government should find a way of increasing allocation to this social protection initiative as a social safety measure. So government is clear that even though you are going for a program, we must do everything to increase the protection, the cover we provide for the vulnerable. Government is also expected to align the 2023 budget to the prior action Dr. mentioned about the 2023 budget to the prior, and I'll come to the specifics on that. Now we will be escalating the discussion. The fund is expected to come in the last week of this month, where they will do the next mission visit, and from that discussion, we can have a closure of the staff level agreement by the end of December. So that is the roadmap. But let's come to the Ghana post-economic program. In fact, before we go to the next mission visit or the discussion, government must present what we call Memorandum of Economic and Financial Policy. This Memorandum of Economic and Financial Policy is actually going to be driven from the local policies that we term as post-COVID economic recovery program.
All right.
Okay, this program basically has some target. One, we intend to install fiscal stability. That is one of the objectives of the government program that people say they are not even aware of. Another objective of that is we want to restore debt sustainability, including the cost of financing our loans. That's another objective. The third objective of that, we want to bring back stabilize inflation and make it as low as possible, because we know 40% inflation is quite abnormal.
Yeah, but and most of these targets, if you look at any of our
IMF I'm coming.
Have always been.
No, I'm coming to that, but that's why.
Just a quick one, because I know we don't have to. Yeah. Has the government submitted a letter of intent to the IMF as yet?
Government has submitted a letter.
They've done the LOI.
They've done that.
Okay.
They've done that.
A couple of your messages. We are running out of time, Doc. I'll maybe we'll get a minute for you before we go. A couple of your messages. This one says that it says this paints a clearer picture of how difficult the times are for ordinary Ghanaians. And this is the story. A Trotsky, that's a Trotro, evangelist just finished preaching, and not a single person on the bus heeded to his call for offertory. Samson, note that. Papa Anoble says, so buffer stock has no capacity to supply local rice to schools? What happened to the one district, one silo? A clear indication that planting for food and jobs has failed. By the way, who has the contract to the rice? I guess it's a job for the boys and fronting for Oga. Gideon Bishop says the only way out now is for our government to adjust its way of doing things, to cut down on cost. Unfortunately, it is business as usual. And that brings me to Theo again. You remember when this whole thing started and you guys started saying, cut down size of government, cut down size of government. And it does appear, as far as the president is concerned, that's no solution. So he's not taking any of that. When the Citizen Coalition met with the president, Dr. Kuja Asante, speaking to the president directly, said this. He called on the president to, as a matter of urgency, reduce the size of his government, to cut down expenditure and reshuffle his ministerial team as a signal of a new short-term social contract to manage the ongoing crisis. This act, the coalition believes, will bolster citizens' confidence in government's consciousness of their plight, and for the short and medium term will be critical in addressing some fiscal issues as the country navigates its current economic crisis. Then they give a host of other things that they believe that government should look at. I've just, before we started, referred to you to the Catholic Bishops' Conference and their statement also. They're expecting some drastic measures, to show a sign from the government that we appreciate what is going on in the country and we are trying to solve them. So the question is, why is the president just not listening when many people are talking about some of these things that need to be done? He says this is also the battle of the Lord, and so this is the clergy speaking to you. Do something and do it fast. I read just two more messages. And this one, forgive me, this one from this texter says, it says that there are many of you are still commenting on the agric issue. It says, the state has not proven capable of doing anything efficiently. This same ministry, that's agric ministry, started planting for food and jobs, rearing for something with fanfare. This year, there was no fertilizer because government owes huge sums to suppliers. That policy has virtually failed. The Mills government tried block farming. That too failed. It is disgraceful that a government that is supposed to be promoting free market economy is engaged in this unsustainable populist gimmick. This is stillborn, but the cost to Ghanaians will be humongous when the Auditor General goes into the matter. All right. This one says, are you aware the size of government is not only the number of ministers? That is also correct. Theo Champong and the rest of them have been saying it. The need to delayer some of the institutions where you have 2, 3, and then the ministries themselves, the presidential staffers, there are so many of them, you know, and we understand that the presidential staffers are equivalent to deputy ministers and full ministers as well. That's also a lot of cost. Earlier, I told you about Dr. Theo Champong and the works that he has been up to. Theophilus Champong here and Thomas Kojo Stevens. Petroleum Resource Management in Africa. Lessons from 10 years of oil and gas production in Ghana. So this is the book that I was talking about. I think you will find it useful. Let's all try and grab a copy. Our time is up. If you had just a second to tell Ghanaians about coping, what would you say?
Yeah, but I'll just probably ask Ghanaians that they should be patient with the government. Government will bring down prices of fuel by the measures we are taking.
Okay. Yes, Doc.
We just have to be optimistic. It's difficult. I'm looking forward to the 2023 budget. That's the big one on the horizon. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you also very much. And as always, my outfits, it's by Habil Scooter. You can find them at Adringano Gate, East Legon, and the number is 0200 84 1988. And my guests have been Dr. Tia Abdul Kabiru Mahama, Economic Advisor, Office of the Vice President, Dr. Theo Champong, Political Risk Analyst and Economist. And you heard also Alfred Ogbame, member of the National Democratic Congress, NDC. Earlier we had Gideon Abuaje, we had Yao Edupoku, and we had Joseph Obeng of Guta as well. I'm Samson Lardy Anyenini. Have a good afternoon. Thanks for your company.